Hey, this is Mike from Minimal 3D Pit, and today I'm going to go ahead and set up Klipperscreen. So let's go ahead and get started. Recently contacted by Elecrow, a PCB fab 3D printing and CNC service, who also does electronics. And they've asked me to review a screen of theirs, which I have on screen. It's an HD 5-inch screen, positive touch. And normally I wouldn't review a screen, but it's actually perfect timing because I've decided, particularly after using my Voron, which does have a little screen on it, that I want to have a dedicated screen on my Mercury 1.1, which right now I just use either a detached K panel or I use the web interface, but I'd like just to have a screen on it, which would be helpful. So what I'm going to do is set up Klipperscreen, which actually should be pretty simple, and just use this screen they've sent me. The only issue I'll have to do is probably off camera, after I've done the video, I probably will figure out how I'm going to mount it and find a case for it. But right now, I'm just opening the screen up, take a look at what's there, and then we'll switch over and install it on the printer and get Klipperscreen rolling. The first thing I want to point out is they shipped it in this box. So it was in this box, and then it came in a separate box, which I really like. So it's very well protected. I've ordered a screen in the past from Amazon, and of course they sent in the manufacturer's box, which wound up ruining the screen. So I'm going to give it to Elecrow for sending me something that's well packaged. Looks like we have some connections here. Fan. I'll have to figure out what this is. So I'll have to look at the different types of connections here. And then let's look at the screen itself. Ooh. Now that screen feels heavy. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It feels very solidly made. So that makes me happy. Let me put these boxes aside, and we'll have to see what all the separate bags here are. Again, let me get rid of trash. But I will say this, the screen is very well built and feels very solid. So that's great. There's an HDMI port. Controls for backlight, volume, micro USB, and I'm willing to bet that's to plug in these, where I plug these in, and that gives it different functionality. But again, we'll have to test that, and I'll have to read the directions. So it does have sound. There's where the fan goes. I'll have to figure out how to mount the fan. There's adhesive here, so I bet. No, well, I'll figure that out. That's looking pretty good. I'm not going to take the plastic off right now. Let me pull out the directions and just see what we have, because it looks like I have various connections here. I'm not sure exactly what I want, but this is actually good. I'm happy with various connections. And standoffs have those as well. So let me get the directions out. I want to start off by giving Elecrow props for some really, really detailed instructions. Now I'm going to point out this huge set of instructions, all in English, that's really well written and very understandable. Now what these different connections are, and I'm sure this for Raspberry Pi 3B, what they're actually doing is mounting, if you have a Raspberry Pi, on the back of the board here. So you're actually mounting the Raspberry Pi, and then you use these connections basically to chain the Raspberry Pi directly to the screen. And you could do that through the micro USB or via the HDMI. Now in my case, I'm using a CB1, so I'm not mounting this to the screen, but I'm just going to use an HDMI cord from here going directly over to my CB1. But I'm just really, really impressed that this manual or instruction sheet is just so detailed. I think there's a thing or two that could be learned from Big Tree Tech, could learn a thing or two from that, where you actually have really good instructions and you give it to somebody where they don't have to search for it. So I have my screen, HDMI port, and what I should need to do is literally just switch over, and I'm sorry, I just kicked my desk. I should need to go over and let's switch over to the printer. And what we're going to do, we're via my desktop here, we're going to make sure Klipperscreen's installed and updated, and then we'll hook up the display and see how that works. So I'm going to start off by SSHing into my machine. I'm just going to do SSH. The username is BQ. And I'm going to do an @. The name of the machine is m1.local. I'm going to type in the password. And that should take me to the machine. Now, what I'm going to do is run an update. So I'm just going to do sudo apt get update. Now, you can run this all as one step. I do it as 2 steps just so everybody can see what I'm doing. So the first thing I'm doing is the printer is checking online to see what updates are available. So that's the first step here. And again, you could run these simultaneously. I just do it as 2 separate steps so that way everybody can see what's going on. So now the CB1 knows what updates are available. So now I'm going to type in sudo apt get upgrade. And in my case, what it'll do is if there's updates, it'll give me a yes or no question. Now, right now, as you can see, there are no updates. Now I'm going to stress this is updates for the operating system as opposed to Klipper and everything else. So now I'm going to do basically just going to go backwards here till I hit what I need. And my next step is I'm going to install, or I'm going to open up the Klipper update, the Klipper install and update helper. So let's switch over to their website because I can't remember the command I need for the script. And let's just take a quick look at that. So I've done a video on the Klipper install and update helper in the past. This is how I've installed Klipper on this machine. I already did all the install instructions. The only thing I need right now is this startup script. So I'm just going to copy that. And then let's go over back to my terminal. I'm going to paste in a command here, and this will start the process for the Klipper install and update helper. Now, it is asking me there's an update available, so I'm going to hit yes. I want to install that. I'm going to hit the up arrow on the keyboard. That gets me to the previous command. We're at the main menu. I've already installed Klipper, as I mentioned. I'm going to hit number 2 here and just check for updates because we want to make sure that Klipper and everything else is up to date. Looking through here, yes, everything's up to date. Let's hit back. And I just want to hit number 1, install. And we're going to select number 7, Klipperscreen. We'll install Klipperscreen. This will take a moment or 2. It's not very long. And yes, we want to go ahead and do the default here. So we just want to hit Y. And let's just take a look at this. We want to select the X server because we want the default. We don't want experimental. We're just letting this install. And this is installing not only Klipperscreen, but any dependencies it might have. So this may take a couple minutes. So just be prepared. I'm just going to let it run and sort of chat with you while this is going, just so you can see how long it takes. Normally, I edit the video for the install process, just so we don't have to sit here and stare at the screen, and I don't have to talk the whole time. But I've started finding it's occasionally people ask me, oh, it's taking a lot longer than it did for you. And a lot of it's taken a lot longer because I've cut stuff out. Just to explain one of the things it's doing, it says creating virtual environment. This is part of Python development. So it's setting up my machine to match the developers of Klipperscreen's setup. So that way we don't have any issues where, hey, I'm using a different operating system or anything else. You use a virtual environment so you can match development environments regardless of which machine you're on. Do we want to install Network Manager? I'm going with the default, which is yes. And for most of Klipperscreen, this is what I just do. I do all the defaults. Now I'm going to point out, as you can see, it's actually disconnected from my printer. So we're going to give the printer a minute or two and then SSH back into it. So let me give it a second. And what I'm doing on my side is, particularly with this printer, I have a little bit of a louder fan in it. And what's interesting is I can usually tell when the CB1 kicks on because the fan will actually change sort of the sound. So, and since it's asking me for my password, that pretty much means that it worked. Now I'm just going to rerun the Klipper install and update helper script just to check to make sure it's telling me that everything's installed. And looking down, Klipperscreen is installed. So that's great. So I'm going to hit quit. And if I want to exit out of the machine that I'm SSH into, I can just type in exit. And that takes me back to my desktop. So what we're going to do is I'm going to disconnect the camera from my desk, move over and set up a camera over on the Mercury 1 and just show you how I set this up. So give me a second and we'll head over to the printer. So here's a view of my board in the Mercury 1. We're going to ignore my wire management issues because, as been noticed previously, I am horrible with wire management. And I'm not going to be much better today because it turns out I thought I had a shorter HDMI to micro HDMI port, but apparently I don't. So I have a cord here I'm going to use for this, which is a little bit too long, I think. So I'm going to have extra. Now what we're going to do is with this board, and this is the Mana 8 with CB1, there's the HDMI, micro HDMI port here. And as far as I remember, there's no full-size HDMI. So we're just going to use my cord here and let's install this in the HDMI. So I'm just plugging it in. And I believe I need to go to HDMI 0. Move that back a little bit. I've hooked up the HDMI. The other thing I need to hook up, and it looks like I'm going to need a longer cord, is I do need to have the, I need to plug the screen in via the USB as well. So let's plug that in. So that's powering the screen. Now, unfortunately, I only have a cord that's pretty short. In fact, let me pause and see if I can find something a little longer. Somewhere in the house, I have a micro USB, but can't find it. So, but I do have an extension cord here. So I'm just going to unplug this. So I have this USB extension. Now, hopefully this will transmit power. If it does not, it's not the screen's issue. It's me not having this dang cord. Now, that's one of the problems I've discovered of doing an unboxing is over time, I've unboxed and now it turns out I need something else. Okay, so I have the HDMI and the micro USB. I have the screen. Micro USB is going right in here. Go. And HDMI is going right here. Let's turn on the printer and see if we get power. Now the screen blinked, so that is going to be a really good thing. Now it's showing no signal. Oh, this is looking good. The fact that we're showing the Big Tree Tech sign or logo. Now, I probably do need to rotate the screen. I'll need to find a case for this. Now, this is actually pretty easy, as you can see, that we just connected. It's still trying to connect. Now I just heard my fans change. The sound just changed, which probably means it's really close. So again, we're just giving this a minute. And for whatever reason, this machine, Klipper, does take forever to start. Now I've noticed with my Voron, it's pretty much instantaneous. Now, at least right now, the screen is working. Great colors and all that. We're just still attempting to reconnect. So let's set this down for a minute. And let me switch over to my desktop and see if we're connected over there. Because I still might need to run some configurations on Klipperscreen to get that going. So I was able to get the screen working. The big issue I had was I needed a micro USB, which was fine. I had plenty of those. Turns out, and mainly because I don't use Android phones, I didn't have a micro USB that could do data transfer. Once I got that, I was able to get the screen totally working and configured. Now my next step is to print a case for it. And I'll be honest, this is standard size, so it's very easy to find a case. Overall, I really like the screen. I like the colors. Now I will say it's a capacitive touch. And from what I've read, you might have to do a little bit of configuration inside of your CB1. I didn't have to. Everything just worked out of the box, with the exception of getting that data cable. As I mentioned, Elecrow had sent me this unit at no charge. The review is my own. Now, I will point out I don't like the display as it's shown on the website, simply because it looks like the display is humongous and where the hand's really, really tiny. And this is a 5-inch screen. But with that being said, this is a screen I could definitely see using on any of my printers. I wouldn't hesitate. Overall, I really like it. It works well. I think the colors look great. The only thing I just want to point out is, in order to utilize it, you need a USB, micro USB that has data transmission. They're easy enough to get. If you have Android phones, you probably have some. Turns out I just didn't have any laying around the house that I could easily find. But overall, I like the display and I would recommend it. And going back to installing Klipperscreen, you can see how easy that was as well. If you have any questions or comments, please post them below and I'll get back to you soon. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye.